In this video, I'm going to be continuing on with Paul Copeland's Guide to Bridges, and I'm going to be continuing on from the Sydney Harbour Bridge. So after the Sydney Harbour Bridge, we have concrete arch bridges. So concrete is a commonly used material both worldwide, but in particular in Australia. Concrete requires steel reinforcing. The reason for that is that although concrete is good in compression, concrete means it's good at being squashed, it's terrible at being stretched. A beam or a bridge is by definition bending, and bending always creates both compression and tension at the same time. And what that means is that stone is not very good if you have any tension. Stone arches were one way of dealing with that, but steel reinforcement is another way that concrete can be strong in both in compression, and the tension can be taken by the steel reinforcing. Okay, conveniently, steel and concrete have the same thermal expansion ratio, which means that when they get hot, the steel doesn't grow faster or slower than the concrete, which would cause cracking. So concrete bridges. Okay, so we have most steel arches are continuous. We have a Swiss engineer who talks about having a third hinge at the center of the bridge to allow for shrinking. So this is the case in the Sydney Harbour Bridge. Okay, in 1901, a reinforced concrete bridge was built over the River Inn in Switzerland. So I'm going to go with Meyer. I'm going to take a guess at the pronunciation there. Was the Swiss engineer who built this bridge over the River Inn, and it's over 100 years. I'm not going to go through any of that detail there. It's enough to say that it was a reinforced concrete bridge. Oh yeah, 1901. There we go. Okay, so then we have this guy, Eugene Freycinet, is how I'm going to pronounce that, came up with the idea of prestress concrete, but couldn't be used because the need for war during World War II. So he designed 5 bridges over the... so I'll go to his Wikipedia page. And so he came up with prestress concrete. So I'll just quickly open you this picture. There's a brief introduction of unstressed beam. So we have our unstressed beam. We put load on it. We can see we have this bending. So this part here, it is being squashed. This part here is being stretched. So what we're going to do is we're going to put in some tensile reinforcement for the in the bottom steel. What we're going to do is we're going to stress that, so that when we're done with it, we're going to have this bridge have a camber or a cant. If any of you have ever used the autocorrect and seen that the phone thinks that C-A-N-T is an acceptable word, that is the word that they're going for. Not can't with an apostrophe, but a cant is when there's a bend going up or a camber. So by having that shape go up means that they have to overcome that initial stress before it starts bending on its own. So that can have an advantage. They are still relatively dangerous, but they're becoming less dangerous. There's a whole big topic on pre-stressed concrete here. It's something that I might give you as homework to look into. Anyway, so this guy, let's see how close I was to his name. Freycinet, yes, it's pretty close, from the IPA here. And anyway, so he built some bridges, and we have... He built 5 similar bridges on the Marne. I'm not going to try and pronounce any of these, but one here, one here, one here, one here, and one here. Okay. Then he went and built some more bridges, eventually getting to the Gladesville Bridge, which is in Sydney. Okay, so which is also in the book. So, to do this, he used concrete ducts that were run through the lower arches. These had wires passed through them to pull tight. The compression greatly enhanced the strength of the bridge and reduced the probability of failure. In 1966, he also worked on the Gladesville Bridge. Okay, so finally we're going to get to... Well, I don't know if suspension is last. Yeah, I think suspension bridges are the last ones. Okay, so we're going to go into suspension bridges. Okay, so in the Stone Age, so more than 6,000 years ago, we had suspension bridges that were built by just having vines or creepers slung across the rivers with wooden slats. Many movies have featured adventures across these primitive suspension bridges on steep ravines. Okay, so the oldest ones that are still around are in China, in Yunnan province. I did show you guys these ones before, and they were pretty long. At the time, they were the longest bridges in the world. Well, these ones here we still have at 69 meters, but if we go... Very funny. Okay, so yeah, here we have Yunnan wrought iron bridges at the time were the longest bridges in the world. So it took quite a while until we get a bridge that's longer than that particular span. So the Telford's Menai Suspension Bridge, which we talked about. Okay, so the problem was that they lacked lateral stability. What that means is, has anyone ever walked across a suspension bridge? Maybe like at a bush, when bushwalking, maybe. Did you find it eerie when they go side to side? Yes. Okay, so that was a concern. So what people had is a stiffened deck hanging from the suspension wire to produce a horizontal deck that we have two towers that were anchored at the ends. Australian Bishop Fausto Veranzio proposed the design in Australian, not Australian, in 1595. But it was James Finlay of Pennsylvania who built such a bridge in 1901. It was only 21 meters long. Let's see if he's in my thing. What was the year? 1801. Yeah, Finlay's suspension bridge. Okay. And so that's a picture of Finlay's bridge. Okay, so if we continue back. So Telford produced the first large-scale bridge, the Menai Straits Bridge, which we've looked at already, completed in Wales. Just some more details about that. Is that the Menai? No, that's Brunel's Clifton Bridge. Okay. A bridge across Avon Gorge at Clifton. Brunel, so we've already talked about Brunel before. His favourite design was a suspension bridge. It was 21 meters, and the piers are just there for aesthetic appearance. So it was actually So it talks about how it established Brunel's career, even though it wasn't built until his death, just because these bridges took a really long time to build back in those days. Harbour Bridge taking 9 years to build. 23 to 32. Okay, Roebling was responsible for the introduction of wire cables for the suspension bridges. He designed bridges over the Niagara Gorge and the Ohio River. So I think we've looked at that one already. So the Niagara Falls Suspension Bridge. So we're always interested in the span. 251 was the span. And is it 1855? I don't actually have that one in here. Anyway, okay, so I've added the Niagara Suspension Bridge, even if I spelled that wrong. Okay, going back to the book. Okay, but his masterpiece, the one that he's famous for, is the Brooklyn Bridge, which had a span nearly twice, 486 meters, and was the first to use steel wire cables. So, I think I have Brooklyn Bridge here, and we talked about that in a prior video. It's one of the oldest roadway bridges in the world. Now, I think I said originally that in my other video that it doesn't take cars, but it does say that here it now carries vehicular, pedestrian, and bicycle traffic. Doesn't take commercial vehicles, so no trucks. Okay, so I think I got that part mixed up. But anyway, moving on. Okay, so the Brooklyn Bridge. The Brooklyn Bridge is one of the ones that I mentioned in the Seven Wonders. So you can watch on the internet, Seven Wonders of the Industrial World. There's the Brooklyn Bridge video. So it was built by both Roebling and his son. I won't give any spoilers there, but it was pretty important, a significant bridge. And then we have the Tacoma Narrows Bridge over the Puget Sound. I don't know how to pronounce that. But it went just too far. So we talked about the Tay Bridge disaster. Tage Bridge disaster, which was a lattice girder. Now, that was in beam bridges. And the Tacoma Bridge disaster, Tacoma Narrows Bridge. So that was a long bridge. That was 853. So we're really drastically improving. And I'll just quickly show you a video of that again. I've never seen the colorized version. I'll go to the one I know. And if you watch late enough, you can actually see this is where it tears itself apart.
Who was filming that?
It's a good question. I don't know who was filming it. Oh, there you go. Yeah, you can see it there. Roar! Catastrophic failure. Okay. So, that's the Tacoma Bridge. Okay, so then moving on from that. So this is where I talk about the importance of Australian standards or any sort of standards. So in Australia, we work, Australia and New Zealand work to the ANZ standards. So bridge building code is the AS 5100, and that contains within it a concrete code, a steel code, and special loadings for things like trains and vehicles. And other vehicles. So it's really important. If we don't have standards, one of the things, the advantage of standards is that everyone knows what we're working with. We're all working to a common set of rules, so that one company can work with another company and we'll all be on the same page. That's a good thing to be. But the other advantage of having standards is that if you don't have standards, what will happen is that there will always be people who need the profit more, and they'll be willing to undercut. They'll be willing to go for a little bit less than the standard. And by having a standard, it means that if a bridge fails or a building is not to code, that you have something that you can sue against. You can say, well, this is the standard that has been established or was written into the contract that you had to meet, and you chose to ignore that standard. So that's really important. Okay. So we have next we have the Severn Suspension Bridge, which was a milestone bridge. It was built by Roberts, and it was 988 meters. Okay, so it was less susceptible to side loading, and it used 30% less material because of its shape. So I don't know if we have that in our thing. So I do have the Severn River Bridge, built in '66. I have here it's 1,600 meters long, but the span between these two towers is the 988. So we're getting nearly to a kilometer long now. So it's pretty significant. And the next big ones that we're going to get to, well, no, actually, already by that stage, there was a bridge that was longer. But its efficiency is the thing that we're concerned about. Okay. So they've skipped over one which is probably the most significant cable stay bridge in the world, which is the Golden Gate Bridge. I think it's like the most famous. Surely I have that one already open. No. So it's not called Golden Gate because it's golden. It's called that because Golden Gate Park is the on-ramp to the bridge. It's a very tall bridge off the ground. It's a very tall bridge. It's freezing cold as you go over it. It's the color that it's painted is called International Orange. It's a good trivia question you get every now and then. And they used that because it was the cheapest paint at the time for them. The Harbour Bridge was grey because it was the cheapest paint at the time. And it was the longest bridge. I have on the back of the wall there. It was the longest bridge for 30 years. So it was nearly 1,300 meters long. And it's obviously an icon of the city of San Francisco now. They do have other bridges that are longer. So, for instance, there's the Bay Bridge, but the Bay Bridge has two parts because there's a little island in the middle. Okay, I think the Bay Bridge has been destroyed and they've replaced it with a second Bay Bridge. But anyway, we'll move on. Yeah, anyway, so that's for suspension bridges. Now, the other one that's probably worth mentioning is currently, or at least at the time of recording, the longest bridge in the world is the Akashi Kaiko, or the Akashi Strait Bridge, which joins Kobe to the mainland. Okay, the longest span of any suspension bridge in the world, and I don't know if it's the longest in the world, but I think it's last I checked. It certainly was in 2017 when I made some flashcards. Okay, so that's in Japan. It's a long bridge.